hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up, because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.
This is not a test, my friends. Welcome to the show. This is Armor of Truth Live number 249. Alien Disclosure happened. It happened this week. Did you realize it? Now we all know that aliens are real. They're here. They're among us. We have their ships. We got their bodies. What's weird is an advanced civilization that is able to come light years across the galaxy, I guess, sufficiently advanced enough to make it to Earth from the other side of wherever out there, places that we can't even see, but they just haven't figured out how to land yet. So let's just dive right in this. I don't have a lot of time today for this. I wanted to get on this before we get out of this week's news cycle, because this is a big deal. It's a big deal. We want to let you know, just to remind you too, that we've got a couple, we've got several actually, but there's a series called, it's this, Beware of the Aliens, because it's all fake news. You can see this, there's a part 1 and a part 2 series where we go in depth, and specifically what we're talking about there is, Summer did a great job of researching the implications with like the United Nations over the years with the UFO movement and narrative, and we've got a timeline. Well, it's right here, where you can see over the years how things have led up to where we are today, starting in the 50s with the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs and the Outer Space Treaty in 1967. Did you know we had one of those? On down the line, and then 1980, the Georgia Guidestones were unveiled. 92 is Earth Summit Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. What's that got to do with the UFO narrative? It's got plenty to do with it. 2016, the Paris Climate Accords. In 2020, several things happened. In March, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. What's that got to do with aliens? Plenty. Watch this video series we have and you'll find out. You'll know. The Artemis Accords. These are in 2020. This is a policy, right? It's exopolitics. It's how do we govern outer space, and how do we, what's going to be our action? How are we going to manage policy when we have aliens among us, right? And then in July of 2022, the Georgia Guidestones were bombed. And then unceremoniously, immediately dismantled. October of 2022, NASA fields a team to study UFOs. I skipped one back here. In 2020, the Pentagon released Navy UFO videos. So these are the important videos, well, the videos that you've seen all over the place of the pilots seeing these unidentified craft. November 2022, COP27 announced their new 10 Commandments. So these things seem like they're not necessarily related, but they are. And we want to boil it all down to one thing. right? There was a New York Times article that came out in 2017 that all of the witnesses at the hearing back on Wednesday referred to as the reason they got into this topic, right? The members of Congress referred to it as well. So this is like the canonical document that persuaded them to take up the issue of UFOs or UAPs or whatever you want to call them, or to consider unknown aerial objects as extraterrestrial or off-world technology, and to consider aliens as non-human sentient biological entities that the government had been recovering the vehicles and the bodies for 70 years or more. They all said, this is why I got into this. This is why I was interested in it. Well, we'll get around to that in just a minute, because that article is deceptive. I'm not the only one saying that. There are plenty of people that have noticed this. I'll play a clip for you in just a bit where you see the proof of the lady who wrote the article will tell you that she was deceptive, and she'll tell you why. So the new narrative in UFO or UAP lore was stoked in December 2017 when the now infamous New York Times article by UFO enthusiast Leslie Keane mentioned this 5-year Pentagon program to investigate UFOs. And so then this subject has become more prevalent in recent years with the release of several video recordings of encounters with objects that seem to be moving through the atmosphere at often impossible velocities with no visible method of propulsion. It didn't really have a proper airframe, right? A disc is not a very aerodynamic shape when you're talking about propulsion anyway. So these things are out there, and we're not here to tell you that there aren't things flying around in the atmosphere that we can't explain or that they can't explain. What we're telling you is that they're absolutely 100% not aliens. And by the way, we've got a pretty bad thunderstorm brewing up just outside the window there. So, if you don't mind, a little prayer for your host here today. We'll see how this goes. Congress established the All-Domain Anomaly Research Office, the AARO, to investigate these reports. And as of May 2023, this year, the office has investigated about 800 incidents, none of them extraterrestrial. Witnesses and legislators believe the executive branch and the military know far more about these objects than they're disclosing to Congress. Sue Go, who is a spokesperson for the office, said in a statement that the department is, quote, committed to timely and thorough reporting to Congress, and that the office has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. Now, there hadn't been such a hearing as the one we saw on Wednesday in 50 years. Been 50 years since I think that might have been the Condon report. 50 years ago. A 50-year period where there were no open hearings that entertained UFO testimony. We had actually the one we had last summer and then this year, right? So the first one was last year. Now in Washington, D.C., this past Wednesday, July 26th, the House Oversight Committee's National Security Subcommittee held a hearing about UFOs or UAPs to explore firsthand accounts of them. Are they a threat to national security? Are they a threat to pilot safety? Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett said, we're going to uncover the cover-up. Now let's listen to a couple clips here. This is the general consensus out there.
UFOs are real. We have proof. The United States military has been studying them. There's one case in particular that I can't stop thinking about. It's this case from November 2004 off the coast of California. The military report from the day tells a story of this blue sky, unlimited visibility day with an aircraft carrier that detects, quote, multiple anomalous aerial vehicles descending very rapidly from 60,000 feet down to 50 feet in a matter of seconds. These flying things just hover. They They stay stationary on the radar for a short time, and then they depart at high velocities and turn rates. So they sent out these pilots to go chase these things down and see what was going on. And they actually got video of this stuff. The report describes it as an elongated tic-tac shape, about 47 feet in length. Solid white, smooth, with no edges or wings. As a journalist, I am incredibly skeptical of all things paranormal, okay? Do we have proof that there are extraterrestrials visiting our world? No. But what we do know is that UFOs are real. We have
Okay, so there you go. Now, so what do we do with that, right? He says, we don't have proof, but. No, you've got to have a worldview, right? You've got to know your worldview. You've got to know that it's true in all areas. Why am I here? How did I get here? Who put me here? What's my purpose here? And where am I going? If those questions aren't truthfully answered and understood, you're going to be confused. Maybe aliens do exist. I'm here to tell you today, they don't exist. Now, I know people out there are going to say, who are you? How can you make such a statement? Well, stay tuned. We've made this case before, we'll make it again. All right, so we'll get around here to David Grusch in just a moment, but and here's another little clip for you. U.S. fighter jet shot down an unidentified object drifting high over Alaska. Now, this is back in February this year when we had that big flap of, well, they called them UFOs. I'll tell you one thing, somebody knows what they are. And here's some of them being shot down.
Break one, blast one. That is a T kill. The balloon is completely out.
Is it encouraging? I have to ask you, do you feel encouraged to know that our military is capable of shooting down balloons? I don't know. That doesn't make me feel too safe. Well, at least they can shoot balloons down. Look, I'm sure our military men and women can handle a lot of things, but it's the government, it's the people in charge that are making us all look really silly right now. This is one of the Navy.
Three retired military
videos.
veterans told Congress today that the government is covering up evidence of UFOs. Former Navy fighter pilot Ryan Graves and former Navy commander David Fravor say they have encountered UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomenon, performing inexplicable maneuvers that could not be piloted by humans. The hearings also included warnings that the sightings are a national security problem, and the government has been too secretive.
Hang on, did you see that? What was that? Did they just throw in an orb or some kind of a ghost video in this report?
Piloted
I didn't
by
notice
humans.
that.
The hearings also
What
included
is that
warnings
doing in
that
there?
The sightings are a national security problem, and the government has been too
Those were moths, man.
secretive about the information.
It was the Mothman.
I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program.
And that's from Wednesday, and that's been Grusch's claim all along, that he learned of this crash retrieval program. Okay, now here I want you to hear this clip. I had indexed quite a few clips, but we don't need that many, because I'm telling you, the pilots, as you heard there were three witnesses. One was David Grusch, the infamous, and he was flanked by here, this is, you see there, that's David Fravor, and Ryan Graves on the other side. Now, these guys are, at least I know Graves is an F-18 Super Hornet pilot. And these guys were great. They were just telling you what they saw and what happened, without any speculation. David Grusch, nothing but speculation. It's all he has. In fact, listen to this moment right here.
Mr. Grusch, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grusch, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace compartmented programs, yeah.
Do you have knowledge or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And this goes on like this all afternoon. No really critical questions until we get to the Missouri congressman. We'll hear his questions in just a moment. But Grusch is a former military intelligence officer of 14 years. He served as the National Reconnaissance Office's representative to the AARO until earlier this year when he stepped down from his position to come be to come be a whistleblower, right, to expose the truth about aliens and UFOs. Grusch appeared before this committee, as we said earlier, flanked by 2 fighter pilots to make statements and answer questions about everything from UFO sightings and encounters to government cover-ups and possession of alien technology and alien bodies that were recovered apparently during a decades-long secret alien crash retrieval team. Grusch told the committee that the truth about non-human technical vehicles and non-human life forms is being hidden from Congress and the American people by agencies of the executive branch. So really what we have here is sort of a war between the legislative branch and the executive branch. The executive branch not wanting to share all of its information with the Congress. So he said that during his duty examining classified programs, he was informed of a multi-decade crash. He said this crash retrieval program went back to the 30s. Okay, and that all of this has been hidden from Congress, and that's not right, they say. I would agree if that was happening. It shouldn't be hidden. But what is actually happening? See, Grusch he declined to answer or elaborate on many questions about what he knew about classified programs, but he said he was hopeful that his actions would ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Now, he said nothing new. The pilots, if you want to watch this back, these pilots, their testimony was very interesting. Now, what they saw, there is no reason to leap to the conclusion that it's alien, right? But that's what this hearing did, and it didn't make us look very good. You know, any foreign adversaries who happen to be watching this, they're chuckling because they're the ones watching us. Those drones, these things that these people are reporting are clearly adversaries. And we'll share why I think that with you in just a bit. So this was a bipartisan group, right? That's what they kept claiming, is that we're a bipartisan group of representatives. Well, in a bipartisan fashion, they all looked pretty silly. Chuck Schumer introduced an amendment to the annual defense spending bill that would require agencies to hand over UAP records with the presumption of immediate disclosure, right? That's the term, disclosure. Alien disclosure. Disclosure of life on other planets. Now, Schumer can ask for that, but it doesn't mean that any branch, like for instance, let's just say the Air Force or the Navy, they're under the purview of the president, right? That's the commander in chief. So that's the executive branch. So what they keep to themselves, it's just not likely that that Congress is ever going to see any of this stuff. But that's not what this is about, right? This is more about an overall narrative. At Wednesday's hearing, lawmakers of both parties expressed anger about their inability to get information about these unidentified objects from the military and from intelligence agencies, describing a system of overclassification. Now, I would certainly agree with that. We live in the age of the national security state, right? Overclassification. Anything that you just don't want people to know about or you're going to make money on, you classify it, right? We do live in an age of overclassification. But Florida Congressman Jared Moskowitz said, we should have disclosure today. We should have disclosure tomorrow. The time has come. Disclosure of what? Exactly. The chairman of the subcommittee, House Republican Glenn Grotham, said, "We look forward to getting some answers in a more confidential setting. I assume some legislation will come out of this." Maybe. But now, since 2017, this UFO community, the whole story has been ramping up, right? In 2017, there was an article published in the New York Times, but when that article came out, it sort of it brought a man named former Pentagon agent and UFO huckster, in my opinion, Luis Elizondo, brought him to celebrity status. He claims that the higher-ups are ignoring and actively suppressing evidence of alien encounters. But the only evidence he has ever produced is a UAP file detailing sightings with no clear explanations. Who's really persuaded by this? There are a lot of people who believe and want to believe and will take anything as evidence. Well, now the big star of the UFO community is David Grusch. I would say instead of a star, he's more like a gas giant. But there's nothing new in his claims. We've covered it here. There's a video on our channel. In fact, it's on the trailer. When you come to our channel, you'll see it there right now, where David Grusch's first interview. It's hearsay. It's vapid speculation, right? He's seen nothing. And we'll show you that clip in a minute when the Missouri congressman calls him on it. Grusch was born in 1987. He served in the Air Force and then from 2016 to 2021, he was, well, as we said earlier, a senior intelligence officer at the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, and was the representative to the UAP task force from late 2021 until July 2022. Okay. He also worked for something called the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. I think the name implies that they're monitoring the atmosphere and maybe low Earth orbit. I don't know what all that entails. But during his time as an intelligence officer, he claimed that he stumbled upon a massive government conspiracy. And he left his job, as he said, in April of this year. Now, before Grusch did any interviews this year, he had to supply his previous employers, because he signed a non-disclosure agreement, and he has a security clearance. I assume it's a top secret security clearance. So before he did any interviews, he had to go to the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security. The Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review is what it is. And he had to tell them, give them the information that he intended to release in his interviews. And they cleared his statements for open publication. All right. What that means is that nothing that David Grusch has revealed was top secret. Right? None of it. In fact, the U.S. government has never had a UFO department. Now they have these task force now that ever since in 2017, this New York Times article that we'll debunk in just a moment. So let me move on now. June 5th of this year, month and a half ago, this article came out in The Debrief. It's a website. David's claims were published in The Debrief, which is really kind of an unknown website. It's really only known among UFO buffs. The Debrief claims to be self-funded and that they explore things like frontier science and innovative technology. Leslie Keane and David Blumenthal are writers at The Debrief, and they're both well-known UFO activists, right? In that article, David claimed that for decades, this crash retrieval team had been operating, and that they have intact and partially intact spacecraft of non-human origin. That they possess unique atomic arrangements and radiological signatures, and they must be of exotic origin, he says. David claimed that the secret program did not share information about their activity to Congress in violation of the law. Grusch supplied information about this secret operation to Congress, and to the Department of Defense Inspector General. As a result, Grusch said he was targeted and harassed by members of the secret recovery operation. He filed a complaint saying that he was the victim of illegal retaliation because he made confidential disclosures. Now I have an image here. I'll pull it up in a bit here, of David Grusch sitting around the table. If you didn't notice, right here, Grusch here, the guy sitting behind him, right there over his on screen left, the guy with the silver fox there on the left, that's George Knapp. George Knapp is a long time. He works for a news station in Las Vegas, Nevada, and he's been one of the primary newsmen in the UFO movement for decades, right? Covering anything. Co-wrote a book about Skinwalker Ranch that was supposed to be like uncovering the truth. It was nothing. It was just campfire stories. And on Grusch's other side there, the guy with the mustache and beard there, that is Jeremy Kenyon, Lockyer Corbell. It's a lot of names, but Jeremy Corbell. He's a filmmaker. George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell there. Knapp is the guy who brought Bob Lazar onto the scene. He was the guy who first interviewed Bob Lazar. And Corbell is the guy who made, back in 2020, this new film documentary about Bob Lazar. Anyway, what I'm telling you here is Grusch has been seen out on the UFO conference circuit back last summer, and I'm sure he'll be there again this year. Now, why is that important? Because as we heard in the hearing yesterday or Wednesday, one of the Congressman Burchett said these guys have nothing to gain from this. I can tell you the pilots don't have much to gain from this, but Grusch, you got a lot to gain from this, right? His visibility has. Let me tell you what, you can make serious bank on that UFO conference circuit, right? The UFO con, alien con. It is a con, that's for sure. But in the article, the debrief article, it had a lot of elements, and you see this in our you can see this in our video too, because he did an interview with News Nation as well. But the article seemed to boost his credibility. For example, a retired Army colonel said that David was beyond reproach in a performance report. That he was an adept staff officer and strategist, and a 2022 performance evaluation claimed that Grusch was an officer with the strongest possible moral compass. Is that too much? But that's what the article had. In that interview, Grusch said, believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true, when he said, talking about non-human entities. But what's wrong here? As I said, it's a fact that Grusch, before he could speak to anyone, had to clear it all through his former employers. And in the debrief article, there was a paragraph there that said, in accordance with protocols, Grusch provided the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review at the Department of Defense with the information he intended to disclose to the debrief. So that his on-the-record statements were all cleared for open publication on April 4th and 6th of this year. That tells you that nothing he said had anything to do with any programs that they were actually working. What am I saying? What we're saying here is there is absolutely no top secret crash retrieval program, or he couldn't have mentioned it. He couldn't have said anything about it. Just to throw that out there. So they had to sign off on what he could say. So there it is, right? That's the evidence the UFO community's been waiting for, so they could be redeemed from decades of ridicule in the embarrassing absence of any physical evidence, right? Strike up the Roswell High School band, right? Disclosure is here. Not really. Not really. Back in 2021, a highly anticipated U.S. government report on UAP was inconclusive. Out of 144 strange objects the military personnel reported as a threat to safety and national security, exactly none of them were extraterrestrial. The Office of Director of National Intelligence, the ODNI, said the lack of high-quality reporting hampers our ability to draw firm conclusions. So, and now, but what are they, right? That's the question people want asked or answered. What are they? Astrophysicist Adam Frank says the videos of the objects are most likely footage from drones from Russia or China, or just more prosaic explanation. Jason Lyle, Dr. Jason Lyle, if you'll search his name on YouTube, you'll find him, and he's an astrophysicist as well. He's also a Christian, and he'll explain a lot of what's going on here, which it's not difficult to understand what's happening here, which makes you wonder, why is Congress doing this? This must be some kind of 4D chess psyop, right? Or are they just not very smart? You can decide. Tyler Rogaway over at The Drive, or a publication called The War Zone, who writes about military technology and stuff like that, says, I've seen more than enough to tell you that it's clear that a very terrestrial adversary is toying with us in our own backyard using relatively simple technologies, drones and balloons, and making off with what could be the biggest intelligence haul of a generation. While that may disappoint some who hope the origins of all these events are far more exotic in nature, the strategic implications of these bold operations, which have been happening for years undeterred, are massive. Now that's what's important here. That's what nobody's talking about. Something is out there appearing to behave like to defy the laws of physics. Now let me make this point here. All of these the videos of these objects you've seen, it's not as if someone's holding a camera out the window and videoing the object. When you see the object, we're talking about these black and white shots of, let's see here. I don't have one queued up. But you know, out of the videos that the pilot shot. That's not just a video. That is a video depiction of the terrain with several overlays on it. One of those overlays would be a radar overlay, right? And images would be projected onto that screen. So the technology exists today to make it appear as though there is an object there that's not there, that's moving in strange ways. In fact, the United States, there was a Project Palladium, or something called, the technology was called Palladium. This was in the 60s, where the United States was able to put I guess it was drones or type of aircraft, not even aircraft, but just very low-tech objects into the air and the atmosphere around Cuba that would completely confuse their radar. And on their radar, it looked like things were going 5 miles in just a few seconds, you know, or how was that the claim? 60 miles in less than a minute or something like that. So this technology is not like it's not around. It's not like it's impossible. But the researchers and reporters at the War Zone have been working since 2019 to demonstrate that many of the events involving supposed UFOs or UAP over the last decade are actually foreign adversaries utilizing advances in actually low-tech drone technology and even simpler platforms to gather intelligence on some of America's most sensitive warfighting capabilities. Rugaway says, quote, the utter lack of vision and early robust interest in regards to this emerging threat will go down as one of the Pentagon's biggest strategic missteps of our time. This is a blind spot we ourselves literally created out of cultural taboos and a military-industrial complex that is ill-suited to foresee and counter a lower-end threat that is very hard to defend against. One of the biggest problems with this topic is that people expect one grand explanation for the entire mystery, right? It's alien, it's disclosure. But this is flawed thinking at its core. I also believe America's general stigma surrounding UFOs was successfully targeted and leveraged by our adversaries, which helped these activities to persist far longer than they should have. Now, as the report says, take note of where all these reports are coming from, these UAP, these UFOs at the congressional hearing, right? They're happening where the military are doing exercises. Rugaway says, quote, the most remarkable appearances of these objects seem to correlate with major Navy exercises, where these advances in air defense capabilities were being integrated across a carrier strike group. In other words, it seemed that these mysterious crafts had very keen interest in America's latest and greatest operational counter-air capabilities. Following research and even conversations with the pilot Ryan Graves, who we saw Wednesday, Rugaway spoke with him. He said, who was one of the pilots that appeared with Grusch here. At the congressional oversight hearing on Wednesday, Rugaway reported in June 2019. Sorry, I got my notes mixed up. He reported in June of 2019 when he talked to Pilot Graves back then. He said that new generations of air defense sensor technology that were present during both series of encounters with these UAP is, quote, something we have found especially intriguing and may point to the possibility that these events were tests of highly exotic and secret technology belonging to the U.S. military or had even been deployed by its adversaries. Now there's your most likely answer, right? It's just our stuff, or it's one of our military adversaries. But think about this. Traditional espionage or spying is one way for an adversary to gather information, right? You go in, you do your best Clouseau, and you go into the enemy's headquarters and you gather his material. That's one way, right? But nothing is better than actually putting your drone in the line of fire, and while you're in the line of fire, your drone is measuring all the signals and frequencies that are beaten down on it, right? So as this plane has it on its radar, that's a signal that the drone can absorb, and it's just measuring all your capabilities to monitor it. Right? In other words, purposefully becoming the target of your adversary takes spying to a whole other level. For example, in the 1960s, the CIA launched radar reflectors on balloons off Cuba's coastline via U.S. Navy submarine and used an electronic warfare system called Palladium that would trick the latest Soviet radar systems into showing their operators that enemy craft were rushing toward Cuban shores, right? And this coaxed the Cuban air defense system to light up and just confused everyone. So these were balloon-borne radar deflectors. So there's that, right, that confused the Soviets. Now, let's look at a little bit some of the responses here. Here's Representative Nancy Mace asking Grusch a question.
You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in a public setting.
Okay, so none of that's silly. To me, that's silly, right? Because he's already said that we have craft and we have bodies. So the question is, have we made contact? Well, is that not self-evident? But I say that non-human, right? The term today and for the past few weeks has been non-human. They're non-human, right? These things crash and what's in them is non-human. Does anybody remember the early space missions of the 1950s and 60s, where many countries launched animals into space in early experimentation with space travel, right? Does anybody remember that? So the number of different kinds of animals that were launched into space is large, just extensive. and it includes a wide range of species. Just some of the animals that we know about that were launched into space include fruit flies, mice, rats, monkeys, dogs, cats, frogs, fish, turtles, guinea pigs, even silkworms were launched into space. Now, here's a question for the gallery. You guys consider this. David Grusch said that there has been a government department whose responsibility it was to retrieve crashed spacecraft beginning in the 1930s. Okay, so over that long stretch of time, right, almost 100 years now, how many of those retrieved craft that were found with non-human biologics might have been remnants of some of those hundreds, perhaps thousands of missions where animals were launched into space? Now, assuming that the craft doesn't burn up on re-entry, which is most likely, or perhaps it never made it out of the atmosphere, but fell back to Earth in some remote area of the wide open U.S. desert or some other far-flung land, well, at some point, months or years later, maybe a crash retrieval team comes along and collects it and recovers the animal astronaut inside. That would be a non-human biologic, would it not? Nobody here said that we've recovered alien bodies, with 2 arms and 2 legs, and they've got uniforms, and nobody. I'm just telling you this because, in occultism and Luciferianism, there's this idea of revelation of the method, right? Where as long as you give people, you tell them what you're going to do to them, or you tell them how you're going to deceive them, then that's your karma is free of that deception. This is where we're getting into high octane speculation, but I'm just offering this for you, right? How many launches have other nations made with human or non-human cargo inside? We probably can't know the number, but it's quite plausible that one team on one day could recover 1 crashed space capsule and its canine cargo, and there you have it. There's a crashed craft that came from space or with a non-human pilot. You see, Grusch never says that they're aliens. He just says they're non-human because that term keeps it broad, right? I simply offer that thought because we have to be very careful with a government who has gotten so used to lying that they can't hardly discern truth from fiction any longer. Do you trust what the government's telling you today? Why would anyone trust a person that emerges one day from the bowels of the national security state claiming that we've been collecting craft and non-human biologics for almost 100 years? Right? We just came out of the pandemic age, right? We know now how our government can be twisted and turned and manipulated against us. So I appreciated Missouri Congressman Eric Burleson, what he had to say. Let's listen to this.
At one point, you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured, and the activity. And I got
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, yeah. So there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment.
So Grusch did this all day. He didn't. Now, listen, folks. The difference between this and the News Nation interview, Grusch is under oath here. Right? He has to be careful about what he says. It's not that he's. This is my opinion. It's not. I don't think that he's trying to protect people and information. He's under oath here. Right. So instead of just outright lying, can play it cool. He's not going to make. And in fact, he really didn't reveal anything that he hadn't already revealed in the interview. Because this was a big nothing burger.
But at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here, because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed, myself and my wife, was very disturbing.
Whatever that was.
Okay.
See, I like Burleson here. He's from Missouri. Missouri is the show me state. you got to show me, right? I'm not just going to believe you.
Constituents actually sent this next question, and I figured I'd ask it since I had the same thought. You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you
So he can answer that question behind closed doors, confidentially, in secret. What have we actually gained here? Right? Nothing. We're just keeping everything secret again. This is silliness.
seen any of the bodies?
That's something.
Sorry, I mean, right there he asked him, have you seen any of the bodies?
Stores, yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
Okay, and so with that being said,
there you go. Nothing, no evidence of anything. Now, we're going to wrap it up with this. The reason that the Congress is interested, the reason that David Grusch has come out, and we should probably do this in a series of reports so that we can get it all out, but I'll refer you anyway over to the New York Post's YouTube channel and the Basement Office playlist there. Stephen Greenstreet and Todd Farley started out years ago in reporting on this as believers, in UFOs and aliens, but they came to find out that it's just a bunch of hooey behind the scenes, right? David Grusch is connected to Skinwalker Ranch. Now, that connection I don't have time to explain right here, but what I want to tell you here is about the 2017 New York Times article that all of these representatives and at least Grusch and everybody refers to as that was the one that really swayed me. Well, these people here, these are all the same names that have been involved with this UFO story for years. The authors of the original New York Times article are Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Keane. These are stars in the UFO world, right? Leslie Keane, for example, many years back, for decades now, has been a UFO activist and researcher and author in the UFO field, and of course is a believer. And these two wrote this now infamous 2017 New York Times front page article revealing this Pentagon UFO program. The only problem with that, the article that the congressman here, you can check out the stream for yourself. All of them, not all of them, the ones who did refer, they probably about half a dozen times. Even the pilots, sadly, even the two pilots mentioned, it was the 2017 article that got me thinking about this. Most of that article is erroneous, factually inaccurate, and deceptive. And that comes from the mouth of one of the authors. Miss Kane, Leslie Keane, actually went on a Showtime documentary and admitted that she had a specific goal and agenda with that New York Times article, and that was to get people to believe in UFOs. So what she was reporting on was not a 5-year Pentagon deep dive into UFOs. It was a $22 million program that Harry Reid, Nevada Senator Harry Reid, had funded for one of his buddies, one of his friends. This was Tim Stratton, I believe is his name. Hope I'm getting that right. Anyway, that's not the important part here. What you need to know is that what that program was for was to study Skinwalker Ranch, right? To study ghosts and goblins on Skinwalker Ranch. I'm not saying nothing weird's happening at Skinwalker Ranch. That's a strange place. Probably a very demonic place, but that's what the program was to do. But in order to get it funded, right, they couldn't say that. They had to put the requisitions for the money that we're going to study unidentified aerial phenomena because it's about national security, right? Let's see here. Right here, I'll let you hear this and then we'll.
The December 2017 New York Times story has done a tremendous amount of good, but unfortunately, it has also muddied the waters. It left the government's ALSAP program completely out of the narrative.
Yeah, why wasn't any of this stuff reported in that bombshell 2017 New York Times?
He's talking about the stuff from Skinwalker Ranch. Why wasn't that reported in the New York Times article? Because that's what the program was studying. Skinwalker Ranch.
Article. How did a story about a program called ALSAP, which investigated UFOs, werewolves, ghosts, goblins, become a story about a program called ATIP, which only investigated UFOs?
Well, Leslie Keane is a longtime UFO believer and UFO researcher, writing UFO stories going back decades. She wrote a best-selling book on UFOs in 2010, and it was Leslie Keane who approached Ralph Blumenthal to pitch the big UFO story to the New York Times. She was one of the authors of the New York Times article.
In a recent Showtime documentary, Leslie Keane was asked why stories about alleged encounters with alien creatures were not included in her 2017 New York Times article. And she replied that her specific goal with that article was to give UFOs credibility, so she avoided reporting on some things.
I chose not to focus on it because the angle that I was taking in my reporting was to try to get credibility for the subject, and I knew that that was not the way to go. That was not the first step in terms of getting people to accept this.
So an author of the original New York Times article, the article that was the first domino to fall in all of this, says she wrote the article with a specific angle in mind. Get people to accept UFOs as real. That sounds like the goal of an activist, not a journalist. But I see where she's coming from, because could you imagine if that first New York Times article had talked about werewolves and poltergeists and giant dino beavers? It would have been laughed at and ridiculed and used as a prime example of the government wasting taxpayer money. But
Dino beavers. That's not a joke. That's really what they'd seen on Skinwalker Ranch. But see, you see the point here. This 2017 New York Times article that blasted Luis Elizondo to UFO fame. Now he's on the circuit making, I don't know, lots of money. You get $10,000 or more to speak at one of those conferences, right? That's worth the money for some of these people, right? All of that was based on an article that was talking about a program that was really about studying Skinwalker Ranch. Right? Anyway, I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds like couldn't be true, but that's just the facts. You can check out these articles at the New York Post. Troy and Stephen Greenstreet, they've done a good job here. They started out as believers, but so what's really happening here? What is actually going on here? What could be the purpose of a narrative that has existed since the advent of broadcast media? It's most certainly about confusion. The reasons for confusing the public certainly vary over the decades, and there are certainly occasions where true believers are reporting stories that they really believe are true. But we're not in the dark on these matters. The truth about aliens can be known. And I want to let you know here, I'm working on a pretty large article that we're going to release on our Substack and on the Armor of Truth app, which you can see here, about the history of this UFO narrative. How did it get to this? So stay on the lookout for that. Download the Armor of Truth mobile app so you'll be the first to read that. But today, a majority both science and theology have already answered this question. For us, where we want to focus is redemption begins with a correct understanding of who you are, who put you here, why are you here, and where are you going. In Genesis chapter 3, the serpent's very first lie to humanity was intended to corrupt the origin story. If a man can be like God, then anything is possible. Redemption begins with the acknowledgement of our true origin and purpose. This UFO narrative, all it really does is confuse people about their origin, right? Because if aliens exist, then evolution is true, right? That's another way to confirm the theory of evolution, right? And if aliens exist, then God has not been forthright in the scriptures. If aliens exist, then Jesus Christ's sacrifice, his atonement on the cross, was not sufficient. The origin of man traces back to the creation account in the book of Genesis. In the beginning, after God formed the world and spoke into existence all other forms of life, God created man. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock, all the wild animals. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So the Bible absolutely asserts that man is the product of a direct and exceptional creative act of God. Scripture does not allow for any other source of origin for humankind. The account in Genesis does not give much detail about how man was created, but the Bible is not concerned with providing a scientific explanation for the origin of man. All we know is that mankind was created from the dust of the earth. Right? We're not stardust. James Taylor, we are stardust. We are golden. We are million-year-old carbon. No, we were made from the dust of the earth, created by God. See, this planet is our home for now. This planet is very special to us. We were created from the dust of this planet. We weren't created in a petri dish somewhere out in the Pleiades and brought here and dropped off by aliens. Scripture's unmistakable message is that God gave the breath of life to man. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground. From pre-existing material, the dust of the ground. But man's soul was an altogether new creation of God, right? So he made mankind out of the dust of the ground, but the breath of life, right? That soul that we all have is a completely new creation, ex nihilo, out of nothing, that God puts into us. That's the breath of life. So together, these two natures of body and soul formed a living being. You see also Ecclesiastes 12:17, Matthew 10:28, 2 Corinthians 5:1-8, Hebrews 12:9. So when God created man, he gave him a supreme place in the world. Not only were human beings God's final work in the process of creation, but they also provided fulfillment and meaning to the rest of God's handiwork, the rest of the universe. God made human beings in his own image, and would multiply and fill the earth and cultivate it and subdue it and rule over all the other creatures. In this place of earthly dominion, man was created to magnify the Lord, to give glory to the Creator and Lord of all the universe. Psalm 8:4-9. All the theory of evolution does. Like many scientists support the theory of naturalistic evolution as the origin of man. Various evolutionists define the theory differently, but it can be summarized as a belief that man ascended from lower animals through an unguided, random chance acting on matter and energy, random chance process of development. Not only is this theory contrary to the teaching of the Word of God, but it also confounds science. And it also holds no firm footing in verifiable facts. It's presented as fact today, but it's really just a dogma. It's just a dogma of man-centered, of humanism. And many leading evolutionists today now admit the origin of species is a complete mystery to them. So I've got to cut it off there because I've got a date with my lovely wife, and I don't want to be too much later for that. Let's bring it around to this. What we're talking about here is something that I'm just calling disordered ambition, right? It's a wrong view of origins. This alien, this UFO story here is nothing more, it's false. And you can see the judgment on this nation as our Congress sits there and entertains the idea of alien bodies in possession. That we have possession of alien bodies. That is the depravity. That is a darkened mind that's just being shown. It's just there. You can see it now. Disordered ambition. That is to say, a wrong view of origins detaches the image bearer of God from their true identity. And it detaches a person from the source of eternal truth. When you believe stories like the alien story, then you are detaching yourself from your true origin story. Why is that important? It's because a false origin, a confused origin story, makes a person vulnerable to double-mindedness, makes a person vulnerable to confusion. It makes a person vulnerable to believing lies. True origins, right? What I just shared with you about how God created mankind from the dust of the earth, right? This is our planet. This is where we live. You can tell we're connected to it that way. And we shouldn't be trying to get off of it and go live on another one. We should be good stewards of this planet, not like the green movement, not like the United Nations or Agenda 21, or not like that, not like the false environmentalist movement, but in the way that God had ordained. So we can't let ourselves get caught up in this because it separates us from our true origin story. And a true origin, understanding the truth about why you're here, where you came from, and what your purpose is while you're here, and where you're going, that is where redemption begins. A proper understanding of who you are, a proper biblical anthropology. You're a fallen person. You've broken all of God's commands. All of them. And for that, we all deserve nothing more than judgment. But God, because He's rich in mercy. Even though we are fallen and prone to wander and sinful, even at our worst, that's where God saves us. True origin story. That's where redemption begins. Right? And that is what Satan did. His first act against God's crowning creation, God's crowning achievement, the creation of mankind. The beings that He loves. He loves humanity. The first thing that Satan did God say? Did God really say that? Was to put questions in the minds of people, of those, our first parents, was to put questions in their mind to separate them from their true origin story. You can be as God. And ultimately, that's what the alien and UFO narrative does to people. So that's why we've got to be, that's why we have to tell the truth about it and be very careful about it. So for now, my friends, I've got another story I want to cover with you at some point very soon, and it is our old friend Clayton Morris over at Redacted recently had a UFO, had a person. What is the, in other words, he was talking about, what is the connection between human trafficking and UFOs? I've got to show you this one day and walk through this with you. But for now, folks, please let me remind you, if you would, please take a moment to like this video. Please. And share the video. Leave us a comment. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. That is free, and it really does help the channel. Download the Armor of Truth mobile app today. It's 100% free. You're going to get live notifications when we go live, and it'll tell you where to go watch us. It'll come with a link. You'll get exclusive content, articles, reports, and resources, Bible studies, and a Tracking Dystopia podcast where we say things we can't say here. And if you can support Armor of Truth financially, please, every donation or gift makes a difference. Don't think you have to break the bank. You don't. Every donation makes a difference. You can use the AOT mobile app Give tab to make a donation quickly and easily, or you can visit our website, armoroftruth.net/donate, or just follow the links in the description under this video. If you could set up a recurring monthly donation to help us plan for the future of Armor of Truth, that really helps us a lot. So what are you waiting for? Download the Armor of Truth mobile app now. My name is Brad, and on behalf of my lovely wife, Summer, together, we're Armor of Truth, and we're seeking a worldview revolution through God's revelation. God bless you, my friends. We'll see you here next time.
Well, that's a rather interesting position coming from a man on a crusade against the evils of technology.
I'm not against technology, Doctor. I'm against the men who deify it at the expense of human truth.
Armor of Truth, live.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel and log on armoroftruth.net.